for the Sun newspaper in what seems a very pointed attack on Theresa May. The Guardian called it a verbal grenade. Our Washington correspondent, Kevin McAleese, just called it business as usual.
That's what he does. That's always been his game plan. You know, don't expect Donald Trump to get on a plane and leave United States airspace and do anything other than that, even when it comes to his closest and longest allies, be that in sort of defence or trade or anything else you care to mention. This is the Donald Trump style. It's blunt, it's abrasive. In his opinion, it makes things happen. You just look at what he left behind in Brussels. He went in there, he told them all they're not paying enough, they need to up their commitments to spending. He said that they've done so to the tune of $33 billion. Listen, the White House will take full credit for that. And then he gets on another plane and heads over to the UK, where Theresa May, who has obviously had a terrible political week, her cabinet's in complete chaos. And if she was looking for any comfort from Donald Trump, well, she wasn't going to get any, because that black tie dinner that they've just finished this evening was a complete disaster, because that bombshell report from the Sun newspaper, obviously owned by Rupert Murdoch and Donald Trump are probably, fast friends when it comes to being on speed dial. They dropped the bombshell interview where Donald Trump said that she'd wrecked Brexit, didn't listen to him, and will pay the consequences.
It's really interesting, isn't it, to try and work out how the Tories and her caucus, and clearly the numbers are being done, will react to this. Will this drive people towards Boris Johnson because Trump is such a fan of Johnson? Or will it drive people back towards Theresa May because people will think, don't you dare tell us who our Prime Minister should be?
I'm not up to speed on the polls, but I have at least heard some rumours that, the United Kingdom is fairly divided in their opinion on Donald Trump, much like the United States is fairly divided on its opinion of Donald Trump. You mentioned Boris Johnson. I think that's interesting because, Donald Trump has referred to Boris Johnson as a very talented guy. He pretty much endorsed him for the top job in Downing Street tonight. Just more dismay for Theresa May with that, just to compound everything else. But, a great night for Boris Johnson. That being said, Boris Johnson was over here not that long ago trying to lobby Donald Trump to get behind the Iran deal. Of course, he didn't. We all know that now. But unlike Merkel and Macron, who did get a face-to-face with Donald Trump to put across their case to preserve that agreement, Boris Johnson was left out in the cold to a degree. The best he could do was a warm seat with Fox and Friends, Donald Trump's preferred morning viewing, to try and communicate his case to the president. So I don't know. Is Donald Trump really getting behind Boris Johnson? Does he just like the guy? Is he that keen on May? Well, he says they have a wonderful relationship. He praised her for her actions at the NATO summit. But, all it takes is getting back on Air Force One, getting his hands on his phone and hitting the Twitter, as we saw with that G7 summit back in Canada. That, seemed to have a communique there where it had his blessing. He gets up to 30,000 feet and he drops a bomb in the form of a tweet, just annihilating any agreement or any deal there.
The only bombs he hasn't been dropping really have been on Vladimir Putin, and he keeps telling us, and he's been repeatedly saying this for days, that dealing with Putin is going to be easier than dealing with the Brits, easier than dealing with NATO, easier than dealing with the EU. To what extent is this being scrutinised by the Republican establishment? How does Trump have to play it with Putin to satisfy skeptics within the GOP?
I think that's an excellent question, because there are plenty of skeptics. Russia is still considered an enemy of the United States, and there are plenty of Republicans who believe that Russia was directly responsible and sponsored this effort to meddle and influence the outcome of the last U.S. presidential election. Have no doubt that there's no love lost for the Kremlin coming out of, across the political aisle here in the United States. But it's an enigma. Donald Trump's bromance with Vladimir Putin has always baffled people, and it continues. He is quick to praise the Russian leader, and always has done. He refers to him as, strong and capable, competitive, and he was talking about Putin again earlier today in Brussels, and it was interesting because Donald Trump's never comfortable talking about election meddling. He just doesn't want to touch the subject. But he said, he's going to broach it. He said when he sits down with Putin in Helsinki for that one-to-one summit, he is going to ask him, did you meddle? And Putin says yes, Donald Trump said he'll tell him not to do it again. I mean, it sort of draws a line under it to a degree, but albeit a very simplistic one.
Kevin McAleese from Washington.